Yes. Did everybody hear that? That's a new thing on Zoom. Okay. And our presenter tonight is Becky member Carlos Eyzaguirre. How do you pronounce it?
Eyzaguirre is how you say it.
Eyzaguirre.
Eyzaguirre
Okay.
in English.
Thank
is
you.
pretty good. Eyzaguirre.
Okay. My name is Daryl Cooperstock. I'm your tech host. I think everybody on here knows that. And our program host tonight is Sam Purdy. Thanks, Sam. We're going to post the recording at some point in the next couple of days on the Becky website, so keep an eye out for that. You can look for it under the learning menu. It's the last choice, online schmoozes. For everyone's sake, I'm going to ask that everybody remain muted until our question and answer session. And at that point, just unmute if you have been called on for a question or comment. Carlos was going to be sharing his screen, but I think, Carlos, did you decide not to?
Yeah, no, I can. I just wanted
you
to.
Can. Okay,
yeah,
so there will be some screen sharing tonight.
Curious to get
Okay, to ask a question, as always, of Carlos, please use the chat function of the Zoom and send me a message directly if you can. If you can't, send it to everybody saying question or comment. Please don't type out your whole question or comment in the chat. You'll have a chance to just articulate it once, and that way you can pay attention to the presentation. I will take the questions and the comments in the order in which they are submitted, and we'll do that later. I think what we're going to do is Carlos will probably present for about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. And if please don't use the raised hand, because I probably won't see it, especially if we go to a second page. I mean, you can if you want, but you know, it's a little more difficult. Anybody have any questions about format or tech? Okay, Sam, take it away.
All right, so I will be very brief, but just again, thank you, Daryl, and everyone for being here. I know that, you know, for several people here, Carlos, you know, quite literally needs no introduction, whether a colleague or a very close relative, you know, here on the call, but, you know, just briefly, just to make sure that, you know, Carlos doesn't have to introduce every part of himself, though I know he's going to kind of have a little bit of, you know, how he got to the current role that he's in as part of this. This presentation today is on New Haven and economic development, which is, you know, really what Carlos does every day. He is the Deputy Economic Development Administrator, new title. In fact, our flyer actually gave him, or didn't reflect his new position. So congratulations.
Thank you.
On this new position. And it, you know, so he works at for the city of New Haven, and has done so for quite some time. We're going to hear tonight about a lot of, you know, specifically COVID period.
Let's start with COVID stuff, yeah. And then
work, yeah. So you know, whether it you know, as many of us know, this has been a really, you know, dynamic time for the economy everywhere. But you know, Carlos will provide a lot of. Can think of a lot of you know, Westville conversations, whether it's on McKinley or Alston or somewhere else throughout the pandemic, that Carlos has provided insights on, you know, this business that's really struggling, or conversations with small business owners and others in the city. So I think we're going to get a lot of really good kind of color and perspective tonight. But also, you know, I'll just share as well that Carlos graduated from New Haven Public Schools. As many of you likely well know, you know, came to Becky as a kid with his mom, who might need to mute herself because I just saw her box just pop up there. You don't want her unmuted while you're going.
To mute, I know.
That's not a mother's privilege on a schmooze, but and of course, as he's mentioned, he now is a member of Becky with his wonderful wife Jane, very recent graduate of Yale School of Nursing, just this week. And their two children, Edie and Luisa. So without further ado, Carlos, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Sam, and I'm really grateful that you're my introducer, because because we've sort of forged a friendship. It's gotten slowed down a little bit with the pandemic, but hopefully now that we're all vaccinated and healthy, and you and I are both healthy, we can resume it sort of in person. But yeah, I think I did want to talk a little bit about, there's one thing, and I don't fault you, Sam, for this, because I know we haven't known each other that long. The actually interesting thing about my background at Becky is, and this is not a judgment either way, but I was not raised at Becky, and Jay and Ina will know that who have known me since I was a kid. My mother, you know, maybe not surprisingly with my name, I'm the product of a mixed marriage, and my parents were not, my mother was not observant when I was a young child, when I was a young boy, really all the way up to I left for college. So interestingly, I've sort of come to Becky later in life for sure. I mean, I watched my mom. I was already away when she really started to go every week with Carl Goldfield, who's not on here. But so it's really been a different experience for me, both with Judaism. Even though my mom was always we were always very aware of our Judaism, but I really didn't learn much at all. I'm still learning so much of it now, and I have a lot to learn because I just wasn't in shul like my youngest sister was, who's 10 years younger. So that's sort of an interesting, I think that makes me a little different from the Becky folks, that a lot of my peers, but not all of them, but many of them. And so, of course, I don't think they even notice, which is a nice thing about Becky, but it is something that makes me, that I'm aware of. And also, I think, just to talk a little bit about the job, you know, I'm really a true New Haven kid, and you know, there's less, you know, like anything, you know, the city government is less parochial than it's ever been, as far as people coming from all over the country, all over the world, sometimes to work for the city. And I really have I think I went to public schools here. You know, and I bounced around to different public schools. I wasn't just in one neighborhood. I grew up in multiple neighborhoods in New Haven. Grew up with a single mom at times, grew up as a renter for most of the first half of my childhood. So that, you know, was a different experience than maybe my kids will certainly experience, because they're quite a bit younger to be living in a home of their own. And so I think I've also, what really makes me passionate about this job is that I also have not had a linear path. And if you know, I mean, it's a little bit, I'm being a little sarcastic, a little bit cheeky about being a New Haven kid, but you know, there's challenges for many New Haven kids. Many New Haven kids are not as lucky as my kids have started out life to be, nor even or as the life that I had, to be honest with you, but it wasn't as privileged as the life that my kids are leading. So I really have had I'm not going to attest to this, but you know, we weren't always sure that I was going to end up here. Let's just put it that way. And I didn't, if you know, my sisters who were brilliant students, I was a brilliant student until I got into middle school, and then I was not. And so anyway, this is just sort of the way of telling you I look around New Haven and the city of New Haven, and you know, I look at this job, and you know, it's really the pinnacle so far of my first half of my career. And you know, most of the time there's not that much promotion from within, and there's not that much to leadership in New Haven. There's not much promotion to leadership roles for you know, people that have been at the city for a long time. And if you actually listened, and you probably didn't, but to the Black and Hispanic Caucus speech, which is an annual speech that the Black and Hispanic Caucus of the Alders give every year, you know, one of the Alders, Alder Clyburn, said, you know, hire New Haven residents for senior positions at the city. And I think that obviously for personal reasons, I'm really glad that they did, but I think it's also really indicative of the moment in time that we're in. Not always the shiniest, newest thing. People may be realizing with where we are with the pandemic, as I'll get into, that maybe you know, being the shiniest, newest thing isn't always what's best for New Haven. So that's sort of my little my little background. I won't get too into my personal history, or it'll you know, it gets too personal. But I think I just want you to know that you know, that I really feel for the underdog, and that, you know, that so many of our New Haven residents are. And as I share my screen, and if I can, and get into sort of what we're seeing with the pandemic, and also a lot of the good news. Could I screen share here? Why am I not? I'm on this all day, and I'm missing this. Hold on, I'm missing the screen share here. Do
you see it on the bottom, Carlos?
Yeah. For some reason, okay, now I got it. Yeah, for some reason it was like the way the way the screen was. So apologies that because I didn't have time to get rid of some of these slides, so you can see some of my other slides that I may not use. So can everybody see this? Okay. So, today I'm gonna, I think as Sam said, and and any of you guys that have been living in the last year know this is, we're in an unprecedented time, and in New Haven, which, despite all the great things that have happened in the last 20 years, particularly, the time that I've been working in government, there's always been, we're a 75% Black and brown city. We've been, I think you guys know, the average family of four is making about 45K a year in New Haven. And so there's always been a lot of need in New Haven, a lot of economic pain, a lot of inequality. And I think, sorry, I hope I'm not trying to be too morose here, because I think that, that this pandemic, again, I don't think to the Becky crowd, because I know what kind of folks most of you are. I think you guys are up tracking this and aware of this and thinking about this, but we knew that this was going to be, we met on March 12th of last year. I was on a call. I was not yet the deputy EDA, but I was on a call with, I was just listening in on a call with the other leaders of the economic development departments for the big cities in the state. And, we talked about what folks were doing to get ready for what they were seeing as a pandemic, but nobody knew how bad it was going to be. Obviously, we couldn't have predicted that. So in New Haven itself, we created this Together New Haven Roundtable, and we've met weekly since the beginning of the pandemic, by and large. So we're about 60 meetings in. We've actually started to go bi-weekly now. So we're about 60 meetings in, and we meet with, Yale, Southern, leaders from Yale, Southern, the Chamber, the various business districts. WOVRA is on there for some local content, for some neighborhood context. And we've really been talking about how we're going to triage the community during COVID. So many of you may have seen the Together New Haven logo and branding that we've been using, if you follow the city closely, that we've been using during the city. But so some of the things that we've done during every week, we have, we've been, even during the height of the pandemic, we were getting thought leaders on the Together New Haven call. We had about 40 people, people from, we had people from from all different communities in the city, community leaders. And I was lucky enough to sort of be the leader of this meeting. And I think that really actually went a long way in helping me secure a promotion, because we took the city through the pandemic, through George Floyd, through what was the word when it rebounded in November, when the spike came back, and now to recently to full reopen. So it's been a really wild ride, I guess. Some of the people that we've had on the on this roundtable every Tuesday at 11 we meet, we've had people like Fred Clark from Caesar Clark, from Pelly Clark Pelly, the famous architects that reside in New Haven, on how do we get folks back to work, how are offices making themselves safe during COVID. This is before the reopen. We've had Dr. Oni Agbuagu. So I don't know if any of you guys are in medicine or follow medicine or public health. He's this dynamic young doctor, younger than me, a Nigerian doctor who was leading the Pfizer trials at Yale. He runs the Nathan Smith Clinic, which is the HIV/AIDS clinic, and just an incredible guy. And he you might have seen him on the news, BBC, MSNBC, CNN. He was everywhere on December 22nd or whenever the vaccine rolled out. And we had him on, just a funny story. This is just how amazing in this New Haven community is, despite some of the struggles that I mentioned, is, we had Dr. O on. He agrees to come on the call. And again, this is actually a Becky connection, because Dr. Kaminsky, Naftali Kaminsky's mom, is my new neighbor. I'm his new neighbor, I guess. And I asked him for a name for somebody to talk to us about vaccine, when it was just getting dropped. And he said, oh, not me, but because he's a pulmonologist, so he's pretty up on this stuff. But he said, no, not me. How about this guy? And it turns out it's Dr. Agbuagu, I'd never heard of. He literally is on the call with me, the mayor, the leadership of, the Together New Haven folks. And he jumps off. He said, I have to jump off the call. And then 2 minutes later, my mom is texting me because I told her he was coming on this call, and this amazing guy that's leading the Pfizer trials. He's on MSNBC talking about the vaccine rollout. So, we've been really lucky to have, community members like that step up, and some of the during COVID, and some of the we've also done a lot of new initiatives to combat, to help restaurants stay afloat during the time of COVID. So we've done things like, we've done a lot. First of all, with Together New Haven, a lot of it was, testing, getting people tested for free, standing up testing sites all over New Haven. Fairhaven Health Clinic in particular, you guys may be aware of, obviously what the university did. Hill Health Center, that was really the first step, was getting everybody tested. After that, as testing started to become a normal thing, we worked, in the businesses, we really couldn't do a lot about the business closures either. It was just a totally surreal experience to have no ability to help a business stay afloat, before any of the, the PPP money was created, or, programming was created. After, obviously, once we finally got some response from the federal government in the form of a PPP and EIDL, we spent a lot of time working with local businesses, particularly the ones that don't have the capacity, don't have maybe the accounting, to help them apply for PPP and EIDL. We still have it, actually. We provide some free back office support, up to 6 hours of back office support for businesses that need help applying for these sorts of things. So these are folks that need bookkeepers and accountants. We created a digital marketplace for as many of our businesses that wanted to participate. So that was allowing you to order their merchandise online, which is still dicey, creating your own when you have Amazon and other platforms, but it's something that we did stand up. The other big one that you may have been aware of is the outdoor dining. Over a year ago now,
that would be afterwards. Yeah.
We had a week
So we're.
Sorry. We had a week to get everybody, to get all the restaurants outside. Lamont got even an executive order expanding outdoor dining, loosening the rules as far as permitting. New Haven has a really Byzantine permitting process. I think that's fair to say, and you need 7 sign-offs to get up to do outdoor dining during regular times, because you need traffic and parking and all these different departments and public safety. So we really, last summer it was kind of rocky, but we got about 30 to 40 New Haven businesses out there to do outdoor dining, which in New Haven, as you know, that's a lot. We don't have a ton of outdoor dining in New Haven. This year we greatly increased it because we had a year to sort of work out the kinks. And you might have seen, you probably, if you've been downtown, you've seen how much outdoor dining is going, even with the restaurants fully open. Some of the other things that we have created during COVID, during the time of COVID, is our arts and culture, which falls under economic development, created a creative sector relief fund, which is providing direct assistance in the form of cash to creatives, particularly those that are sole proprietors or that work. Obviously, so many creatives work on individual contracts and that sort of thing. We've also placed, companies like Eyzaguirre have stepped up for the workforce development. We know that's going to be a big part of recovery, is training people for new jobs, training people for jobs that have now popped up post-COVID. And places like Eyzaguirre, I have to give them a shout out, gave $300,000 of what's the word? The cash we could spend the cash however we wanted for workforce development. They gave it through the governor's office, but the money went directly to us. So it's harder than you think to spend $300,000 at the city, let alone, responsibly, let alone the 90 million that's coming. But so those are some of the things that we've worked on. And happy to give you more update on that. But that was sort of our Together New Haven initiative, which is still ongoing. And it was, really in response to to COVID. The other thing I'm going to show you is how badly dented our economy was. I have a whole list of slides here, but I'm going to just go. This shows you we're still at like 6,000 unemployment claims, over 6,000 unemployment claims per week, a week in New Haven. And that's really, it's pretty troubling, because if those are the folks that are making claims, and then there's all the folks that aren't counted. And we don't have, a ton of answers yet for all of that. We're working on it. Workforce development is one. Obviously, the American Rescue Plan is another. The fact that Biden is still, the fact that we're still getting the extra money from the federal government for those that are unemployed is another. But it's concerning, you know, for anybody that lives here, and certainly cares about the residents. It gives you a pretty good look at where how folks are doing or not doing so well. This is sort of a picture of where we are versus the rest of the state, which is in blue, and the rest of the country, which is in red. We're still above. We're still, our unemployment is still higher than both the state and national trends that you see here. And I think we saw that also in 2008. The recovery, we never really, based on the metrics that we've seen, we didn't recover as well as other places might have. The other places did after 2008. So we expect to see sort of a similar, slower recovery here, by and large. But that said, I mean, that said, we actually are, to all this doom and gloom, I apologize. We are seeing, there were some bright spots during COVID. We far and away led the state in housing permits pulled during 2020. So this is just the pandemic year, almost a full pandemic year. And we were at, I think, about 800 by the end of 2020. And if you see, that's more than the next 4 towns combined, including places like Stamford, which were not, you know, nearly as badly, you know, because of its economic base, we're not nearly as badly affected. So we, you know, I think a lot of you guys see that in the all the apartment units being built here, which have continued apace despite the pandemic. Also, the construction industry was not nearly as affected because it didn't have to shut down during COVID. So really, we didn't, for most of the projects that were on deck, we saw some delays, but we haven't seen any projects that were ready to go before COVID not materialize. And you might have seen Sholem and Drusier just completed 18 High Street. There's another 600 units. That's an extension of the University Towers, or I guess New Haven Towers, they call it now. That's a whole new building. You may have seen it. He removed the, I wish I had some pictures. I meant to put some pictures of the new buildings, but I didn't get to it today. The other, so this is, you know, this is really, what's what I'm thinking for? Encouraging that this has stayed, that these numbers have stayed so high. You know, like I said, there's another 600 units coming online in Worcester Square for the 2 developments, the old Comcast site, the old tourism plumbing supply company. Those were 2 that were delayed because of the pandemic, but now you see they're almost done a year and a half, you know, a year and 3 months after the pandemic. So, you know, market rate housing is,
Can I ask a question, Carlos?
Sure, please jump in, guys. I know I have a lot of slides.
I want to, because the last couple of slides that you've given are so interesting in terms, if you kind of put them next to each other in a way of saying, you know, there's more and more demand for housing here, and yet, while it's not, you know, it's perhaps people coming from outside the city, but residents are, you know, continuing at a level that outpaces the state to, you know, submitting unemployment claims. What's the sort of profile? I mean, for me, it's like a story of this so-called K-shaped recovery. But I'm curious, like, what is the profile of that green? What's still attracting new people to come to New Haven? Why have no housing, you know, plans, projects, not housing projects, but projects to build,
sure,
you know, been canceled? What sustains that?
I mean, I asked that. So I don't know if you guys, so I was at the 18 High Street ribbon cutting last week, and I asked the guys, you know, so I don't, you know, that's the other thing is New Haven, we really need to, we're really trying to build up our data science type of, so we don't have a great read, we just don't have the staff, we don't have a great read on why, I mean, Helen may have some thoughts on it too. She's been doing this a lot longer than I have, but I think, I mean, from what I'm hearing, I mean, I think it's still young professionals, Yale Med, bio. I mean, the growth of these industries, and I'll talk a little bit about that as I wrap up, really is still attracting people. When I asked Sholem, the developer and the owner of New Haven Towers last week, and he said, yeah, it's all people affiliated with Yale Med, especially if you're on 18 High Street, because you can walk to Alexion, you can walk to anywhere in the medical campus. You can walk to, you know, you can walk to St. Raphael's, you know. So So I think a lot of it's that, and I think it's still, I still meet a lot. Again, a lot of this is anecdotal because I don't have, you know, great answers here. A lot of it, I see a lot of empty nesters still. You know, people, if you especially go down to downtown, a lot of folks who might have lived in other towns have come here as, you know, they're usually often married, you know, and they've come, they're retired, and they're still coming, I believe. And then I think you're, you know, you're seeing, and some of this is, of course, you know, residential, you know, single family residential development, that kind of thing. And you know, and you're still seeing, maybe not new housing, but you know, houses, you know, because there's not that much land in New Haven, but houses being redeveloped. The other thing about, sort of, to speak to the recovery, you know, and despite those, you know, the numbers, the slower than we would like, you know, the higher than we like unemployment numbers and the slower than we like recovery on the unemployment side, is I have some really interesting slides from, well, we also do a vacant building survey, which is actually pretty interesting. But if you look at, like, this is like our traffic and parking revenue, and this is interesting here because you'll see this is, you know, where there's parking meters generally. So that's mainly downtown and a few other areas, you know, adjacent to downtown where we don't have parking meters all over the city yet. You see it really bottomed out, obviously, when the whole state was shut down. A couple blips here, but I don't think too many of those are that statistically significant from what I was told with the guy I work with was helping me with this. But you see, you see the numbers are really starting to climb up again. And there's a footfall, we also do a footfall count downtown, and those numbers are starting to climb up again for the first time to pre-2020 numbers. And those are the unemployment is usually about 4 weeks. This is an interesting anecdote. I don't have the backup, but the unemployment numbers are usually 4 weeks behind this parking revenue numbers and these footfall numbers. And so we think that if based on what I think this is one of the footfall numbers. So based on what we're seeing with the footfall and with the traffic and parking numbers, you know, we think that will show a commensurate drop in unemployment. So that's sort of just a long overview on COVID. I hope the other interesting thing I would say about that we've seen, Helen helped us with this. We conscripted her into helping us with this. Was we do a vacant storefront survey, which was interesting. Downtown is hurting. I think it's about 20% vacancy for its storefronts. You know, we're generally talking first floor retail, which wouldn't surprise you because the rents are much higher there. It's sometimes $35 a square foot for a retail space, which is a lot, even in a good time. And now, you know, I don't know who can pay that as a retailer. Even the national chains, I'm sure not. You know, you've seen the closings of some national chains downtown, but the neighborhoods, the outlying neighborhoods from quote unquote poorest neighborhoods, you know, the poorer neighborhoods like Kimberly Square on the Hill or Grand Avenue, which is a very vibrant commercial neighborhood, but certainly not a wealthy commercial neighborhood. Those neighborhoods have actually, the vacancies have decreased since we did it in October of or maybe August of last year, August 2020. And then we did it again recently, like late last month. And our numbers for this is our citywide. This is just some updates on citywide vacant storefronts. If you know Liz Zidonius, who runs Wovra, the Westville Renaissance, they have like no vacancies now. They only had a few even in the height of COVID, but they're down to like none. So, you know, so that's a really interesting observation. I think it's just that people are supporting their local businesses that live in the outlying neighborhoods. The rents are significantly cheaper. You know, I mean, it's not totally what I would have expected, but once you think about it, it's interesting. And then I also think if you look, most of the new vacancies, it's Upper Whaley. Those of you that have been Upper Whaley going towards Woodbridge, you'll see a lot of vacancies comparatively, and that area seems to have struggled. But that's, again, it makes some sense because you have to drive there. It's not convenient. It's not particularly, you know, you can't walk to the store. So that's some of the observations that we've had. I don't know if anybody, I'll stop there. I mean, I don't know if anybody wants to have any questions.
At the moment, I don't have any lined up, but the floor is open if somebody wants to.
Well, if there's no questions, that's okay. I will keep going. Just to say
Okay.
some of the good news, I think, is obviously the American Rescue Plan is here, and the money I'm hearing from my contact at the state treasurer's office that the money is like there at the state treasurer's office. So that means it's going to be here very soon. And now the hard part is figuring out, how to spend it wisely. And we've been doing a lot of work on that behind the scenes on, trying to just get coached up on American Rescue Plan and how to spend the money and what our peer cities are doing. Just so for those of you, again, I assume many of you may have read articles more globally about ARP, but it's got four main sources and uses: is support the public health response. So that would be continued testing, continued vaccines, PPE, and other stuff like that to actually combat the pandemic. The other one that's a big one, of course, is replace lost public sector revenue. So that's paying our bills at the city. We've asked for about the first tranche that we were trying to get out the door is 20 million. Our controllers asked for 20 million of it to spend to pay for lost revenue during COVID. It's lost city revenue, and that ultimately be up to our board of alders to decide whether that that they're okay with that, but we think that they will support that. The other big one is lifting up the community. This is address negative economic impacts. That's really what we're thinking of, lifting up the community and the economy, and that's like assistance to our people, New Haven residents, New Haven businesses, or New Haven not-for-profits, creating jobs, and getting residents back to work, those sort of things. So direct assistance to residents and businesses and not-for-profits. And then the other one, that's the big one that most cities are really focusing on, is transformative change. And that includes things like, broadband, citywide broadband. So everybody has a decent internet connection, which we know is so important for our school kids, so many of which really suffered during the closing of the schools with bad internet. I think a lot of folks probably heard a lot of stories about that, both here and nationally. So stuff like broadband for all, growing generational wealth. I mean, I think we've done a lot of research on some of the ways that the appalling really differences, the appalling wealth gap between white and Black and Latino families in the United States. And New Haven is no different than that. We were sort of, we weren't surprised, but we had some research done we just looked at some of the Brookings Institute data, and our income inequality here. I'm glad there's no reporters here, because I don't want me to sound like I'm too harsh, but I think it has to be an honest conversation. And I'm sitting here ensconced in my house on McKinley, and it's easy for any of us to forget, that how bad, and even like I led the meeting off by talking about how much I related to folks in New Haven, and how much I sort of lived, maybe not the most impoverished existence, but I much more similarities with folks in New Haven when I was younger than I do now, with the average New Havener. So I think it's something that, certainly the mayor is our current mayor is really talks about this all the time with us and never lets us forget it. And so I think, yeah.
Carla, I do have a question and a comment lined up now.
Sure.
So would this be an okay time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jay, you had a question?
Yeah, I did. So when you were talking about the unemployment stuff, Carlos, I was just wondering about the effects on the undocumented in the city. I mean, I know a good proportion of our workforce are undocumented, and I assume when they're laid off that it doesn't show up on the unemployment data. Do we have any sense of how that community has been affected, and are they getting any kind of government support through this?
So, right. I mean, I think, we talk, and again, just speaking very honestly to a group of friends here, let's say, we talked a lot about it, when the PPP came out, right? And the money, the PPP money, for those that aren't aware. But, and, of course, there's no money, there was no provision for undocumented workers. And we didn't, and, so I think really, no, I think it's I think the impact's been really pretty severe. But we're not, again, like you said, we're not hearing as much about it. I think you're right, they couldn't collect unemployment. I mean, our colleagues at Workforce Alliance, can't train those folks. We're working a lot with workforce training is a big buzzword now again, because we know we need to get people, back to working new jobs. They can't work without the I-9. I mean, they can't be trained. So I think you're right. I mean, so there is, and I think, I know you follow the news closely here. I mean, there were some amazing things to come out of the undocumented community. Actually, there are neighbors, Samia Collective. I don't know if you guys heard of them. This is Luis Luna, who actually is our neighbor. He's an Ecuadorian guy from the suburbs, actually. He moved here as an adult. He lived in like one of the surrounding towns. He just got naturalized like 2 weeks ago. He's a big guy with Unidad Latina, and now actually he's the lead organizer for the Working Families Party. So he's really come along. He's young. I've known him for about 10 years. And he started this Samia Collective, which means seed. And they now operate out of an apartment above the Westville Quality Market. And he's married to a Jewish woman who works for All Our Kin, or not married, but they're together. And so they're a real power couple. You might have seen him pushing around the neighborhood. He's in a wheelchair right now with a busted knee. I think I saw him near your house the other day, actually, Jay. So you might see him around the neighborhood. They started this Samia Collective, and they were feeding up to 500 families, not just from New Haven, a week, with all private donations. A lot of us gave some of our stimulus money to them. So these informal networks really popped up, and I guess that wouldn't be a surprise also to Jews, because we do know, even though we may have forgotten, we do know about informal networks, and certainly the new Jewish arrivals to New Haven also know about informal community networks. So so a lot of that stuff popped up. And it's amazing what they've done. So a group like Samia has now gotten so big that they started to rethink their mission. Rather than just feeding people, they've now pulled back. They actually stopped the food. They were doing it out of a garage behind Westville Quality Market. They live above, and then they rented a garage space. So next time you'll see the sign if you go behind it. It got so big, and then now they're actually pulling back, that they're going to become, they're filing for, they want to create, they want to use the people that were doing, a lot of people were out of work and we're just doing the food collection instead, and food delivery, and they want to now, a lot of I think 3 of them are going to start a tortilleria, to start a tortilla making business with the help of our collab New Haven, which is our incubator for generally Black, Brown, and women owned businesses. It's a private not-for-profit. So they're now involved with them, and they just graduated from their food incubator training program. So these guys are really, and that was so all in less than a year, because they sort of have turned this into, I can't remember if they're going to do a 501c3 or not for the Samia part, but they've really, so you've seen, I mean, I think everybody sort of seems to be understanding that things like getting these folks starting new businesses, and certainly food businesses have done pretty well so stuff like that. But yeah, I don't think we've done enough, and I kind of lost track. I know Biden's talked about it, about providing for undocumented with ARP, but I can't remember. So it's something that and that we just aren't poised to do as well at the city. I think we're really working on it. We have a lot of partners in that community, but it's a hard group to it's a harder group to reach.
Carlos, we have a comment from Helen.
Hey, Helen.
Helen, can you unmute?
Yeah, it's just somewhat counterintuitive that unemployment is still as high as it is, but we do have businesses that say they're looking for people and are having trouble finding employees. Specifically, there's a business that moved to Fairhaven about a year ago from Brooklyn called Art to Frames.
Mm-hmm.
And they emailed us a couple of weeks ago and said, we're really having trouble finding people because they're growing. And you would think in Fairhaven, they wouldn't. So, I know that there are those who say, well, it's because unemployment payments are so high, but I don't know if that explains it all. I know maybe because it's hard to find childcare.
Yeah.
Hopefully some of the rescue plan money, is that going to go toward offsetting some childcare costs?
I mean, that's a big part of the early conversation, Kellen. We've been talking to like New Haven Child, All Our Kin, all these, I guess I'm learning a lot about these early childhood backbone organizations. So not the daycare centers themselves, but these, what they call themselves, backbone organizations, like All Our Kin and New Haven Child, NH Child. And so, yeah, I think a lot of that, I know the mayor likes the idea of, he's asked us, could you research early childhood ed for everybody in New Haven? Even the folks at All Our Kin or any charter like that's tricky because, how do you replenish the money? The money will run out after 3 years. But then the other argument is like, well, that's better than nothing. But then it'll leave like a benefits cliff, I suppose, is the concern. Some of the interesting things that do address the early childhood, the generational wealth thing is baby bonds. I think you saw Senator Treasurer Wooden. I think he's just about to get that through up at the state capitol. I think there was some last minute shenanigans going on with which I don't understand exactly how the money works up there that as well. But I think that's going to get through. And the city was looking at doing maybe our own and augment, because we could augment what Treasurer Wooden's doing. And if you look at the numbers, it really works. An average New Havener with just a small amount of money could end up with like 15, 18,000 by the time they're 18. Allowing them, to have a little bit of create a little bit of wealth, and then the money, of course, would replenish itself because it's invested. It's invested in in some kind of financial instrument. So, but yeah, no, I know, Helen. I got that email too, and I can't quite understand. And then, of course, right, the national conversation is about the too much money coming from the state and the federal government to get people back to work. But
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Cynthia, you had a question? Can you unmute?
Yeah. Am I unmuted and going? Because I'm not seeing myself right now for some
Yep,
reason.
you're fine. We're hearing you.
Okay. I don't know why I'm not seeing myself. I should be. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I know what I look like. So my had to do with the comment about high rents downtown, which is in part tied to taxes, of course. And I imagine the taxes are higher downtown. And we also know that there's like at least one big institution not paying a lot of taxes. So, but without touching that big issue, the idea of tax relief for some of the downtown landlords so that rents don't have to be so high, has that been discussed?
Yeah, and the city has a program, just like the state's program, that we have where for landlords and tenants, they've not been as well because I think of it's complicated because of the paperwork and it's complicated. So you saw the state had some pretty abysmal numbers originally, like getting the tenant relief out. And similarly, there's stuff for the landlords, but the same thing, the landlords are hesitant to take these programs on. But I think, yes, I think some of the direct assistance for American Rescue Plan, if I said just tenants, which I may have, but I know it would be for tenants and landlords, because we know the small landlords, it's hard to have as much sympathy for them than maybe somebody that's in abject poverty. But you're right. I mean, if you have one unit, or if you're retired and you rely on this money and your taxes are, we have very high taxes here, yeah, those people are really suffering and they may not be getting as much attention, obviously. So yes, I think we're talking a lot about tenant landlord, real tenant landlord direct assistance programs that are easier to access. And you're right, I think there's pretty promising news. We feel like there's promising news on the taxing Yale side. I know I don't want to say taxing Yale. It's a Yale. That's really not the
Contribution.
It's a voluntary contribution. It's a voluntary payment. But
right.
They've been really. If this is maybe it's the moment that we're in. I don't think it's just that any of us downtown are so talented now where we weren't 20 years ago. But I think maybe it's just the time that I think Yale maybe it's they see the moment that they're in. They know New Haven. They see how well that they've done with New Haven, thriving along with them the last 20 years. And so I'm hopeful, and I'm not in those negotiations, but I'm hearing good that they've been pretty fruitful for enhanced voluntary contribution.
Okay, because I was specifically thinking about commercial landlords. I would hate to see downtown ruin. I'm from Rochester, New York, which lost its downtown, and I don't actually know why, but I suspect. I mean, it was the first downtown mall. It was thriving. Everybody used it as a model of what downtown should be, and then I think taxes got too high downtown. And so everybody went to the suburbs, and that would really kill New Haven if that happened. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's some real concern in our downtown stewards, like the town green, who would have the ambassadors, and they do the cleaning, and they just do, they've still been in crisis mode the whole time when you hear 20% vacancies downtown, which we haven't seen in a long time. So I think, we're going to have to do something. Actually, Yale, again, to give them a little credit, has been, from what I've heard, has been they own so much property downtown. they've
Yeah.
actually been pretty forgiving from what I hear. I don't know where we are now. You know, they keep it close to their vest, obviously, but I'm sure maybe the mayor may know, but I don't know how, but they were very forgiving in the early months of rents from there, because they know that they don't, having vacancies at, you know, in Yale properties doesn't do anything for their, you know, for the success of their you know, retail corridor, you know.
Mhm. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Anybody else have a question? Sam?
Sure, yeah, something that, I mean, has been striking me, and I'm curious how it affects your work, is just I'm reminded now of the incredibly short cycles of elections here. It's not always the case that a mayor serves a 2-year term. There's a, you know, election feels like every few moments.
Yeah.
How does, obviously the politics of the last, you know, 2 years, even New Haven aside, have been extraordinarily volatile, but how just, not even just in these last 2 years, but in general, like, does your office sort of rise and fall, or priorities change based on, while we haven't had a new mayor every 2 years, how much does it feel tied to those political cycles?
Well, I mean, you'd be lying if you said, certainly it's a weird feeling down right now, because I'm back in the building by and large. And you know, if I don't know if you saw yesterday, we had our first community meeting on ARP. Actually, I have to say it went incredibly well. It was a really, I mean, I'm both personally and professionally gratified, because it was really nerve-wracking to go, you know. And I think because, for a lot of reasons, because there is a race out there. The mayor's opponent, you know, already got out and did a little thing on how to spend the American, you know, there's a bit of a feeling of a shadow government feeling going on, especially because you know, Ms. Walton, Du Bois Walton is so, most of us really like her. She's talented. She knows the city better than anybody. So, but certainly I have to give the mayor credit. That is really not the current mayor. That has not been, he's really strived to be apolitical. I mean, he wants to win. You can tell, I think, if you know him. He's not a shrinking violet, but he's been really apolitical on this life and death work. I think the work that we all know, a lot of it is life and death for a lot of New Haven residents. I heard it last night at Hill House. How many people, you know, how many people in the Black community lost people? I mean, Susie and I lost somebody to COVID, very close to us, you know, my mom's partner. I hope I wasn't being too forward, you know, with that, but I think it just shows that my mom's former partner. And so that shows that, you know, so, and we know the numbers are, you know, the deaths in the Black community are just, you know, how many people that I have worked with in the Black community that actually did die from COVID, you know, and I have siblings, you know, who don't, you know, who live in different kinds of communities that don't know anybody who died, you know. So so yeah, so my point is, no, I think the mayor's done a really good job. You know, he knows we have a city to run. He knows we're in an incredibly pivotal moment. So, you know, but for someone like me, that's an old hand, both in politics and in city government, and I know everybody, having grown up here, of course, I'm really aware of it. People call me, people, you know, people want to know. But again, both he and Karen have not, you know, so I think that there's not, I think people know that, you know, so much of this stuff, there's a city to run and there's people to help every day. And so, as corny as that may sound, but we really believe that. And, you know, so I think that, but yes, it is really weird. And it's, in the 2-year terms, it's kind of funny, because in the last charter revision, which I think is every 10 years, that was in there to go to 4-year terms. But because we were in a different political moment, you know, and for those of you that were here, then it was a different time, different people running the city, that got thrown out. That revision wasn't enacted by the Board of Alders. And now we're probably, you know, where it would have been better for all of us, right? Because, I mean, all elected officials locally, not just whoever's the mayor, but the Alders would have 4-year terms. And yeah, so in that sense, you know, it's, you know, I have a little sympathy for the mayor, because, you know, taking the politics out of it and my relationships out of it with both of them, because, you know, it's like he's had to run the city on, he's been on crisis mode literally since day one. And I think he's done a pretty damn good job, you know, I mean, and with what, you know, and so much of it, we're helpless with so much of it, the larger forces, the state rulings on closings and the federal and the dollars coming from the feds and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a crazy time now.
Well, you managed to answer that, I think, very politically, and you know, not crossing any lines, though there's no press here. I will see if there is one more question. Oh, Daryl, were you meeting or no?
No.
Otherwise, we can bring things to a close. I certainly don't want to cut anyone off. Okay, I will do that then, and just say, Carlos, thank you so much. This was incredibly illuminating and really current. You know, again, as you said, a lot of what you talked about, you know, tonight is stuff not repeated from, but it kind of shines new light on things that we're seeing in the headlines or just around the city. And so thank you. I want to, you know, thank you and appreciate your taking the time tonight. And we'll get you back to, you know, the complicated bedtime routine of two.
I think I outlasted them. I just would have a couple. There are a lot of great things going on in the city building wise. I just want you guys to know, I think we have 5 minutes. 101 College Street, you know, we're really excited about that. That's another 10-story building, hundreds of millions of dollars in biotech building. Yale's taken 3 floors, has already taken 3 floors of that. Arvinis, which is a spin out, which is a Yale spin out, which was in Science Park, is going to take another 150,000 square feet. So that's another 3 stories. They're breaking ground on June 7th. And Bloomy and Murphy and Rosa and Lamont and Lehman, they're all going to be there. It's a big deal for the state and the region. So, you know, the great news like that is on deck. That's another example of a project that we kept going during the pandemic. We got it approved. That was something I was still working on my previous role as a project manager. And we got that approved last May. So we lost about a year, but June 7th, you know, an incredibly complicated project, right? Because you're taking over the highway, you're taking state land, you're taking federal land, you're building, you know, you're creating a new development site because, you know, you have to raise the land. So stuff like that, you know, incredibly exciting news. You know, stuff like AstraZeneca, you know, obviously acquiring Alexion for $40 billion. I mean, unheard of level of success for a New Haven biotech even just 10 years ago. And my British colleague says, don't worry, it's a great company because they're, you know, he's like, I was like, are we sure this is going to work out for us? But he said, no, this is great for Alexion. Because, you know, this is like they're just such a great company. And so, and then the other really exciting news, and I did work on this too, both as project manager and then as I got the new job, and Helen will tell you that the roles don't always really change. I mean, I still ordered the pizzas last night. I still had to carry the water, literally. You know, so we're, there's the Tweed deal. And I think just, you know, that's another one. Again, I got to give credit to the mayor. I've been working on that project since the beginning of my career, basically in like 2004 or 5. And we never got the deal done, you know, and there was a lot of reasons for that. But this mayor, you know, and the new head of Tweed, it was a real Representative Scanlon, who a lot of you may know politically was a real pain in the neck at times. And they got this deal to the finish line. Obviously, there's still a lot. The final chapter hasn't been written yet, but, you know, we think, you know, there's a $70 million offer on the table from Avports, which has run the airport since 1998, since the authority was created, to, you know, to move the West Terminal, which is the New Haven terminal, to the east side, where there's a lot less houses. It's not it's much less residential on the East Haven side. It would still, you know, we'll still own the property. New Haven will still stay in the name. $5 million for community benefits, for noise mitigation, traffic mitigation, and then there's another million plus of that is for other kinds of community benefits, TBD. And then the other big news, right, is that eliminates the subsidy that we've been, you know, I don't even want to get into how much we've had to give Tweed, you know, over the last 20 years, to keep an airport that barely had any flights. And, you know, new flight coming, Avelo, as you probably saw that, they will start flying like early September. I don't know if it's going to be like Chicago or Florida, but it will be something like that. They haven't said. And then we expect to have other carriers announced over the next next year. So in 3, you know, if everything goes well, we wrote a really strict agreement with them that, you know, that the city won't be there's no liability if for the city or the authority if the deal fails. We get to keep the improvements if they. We feel really good about that deal, and you know, and we met with New Haven Works today and Tweed, and you know, we're really going to make sure that as many jobs go to New Haven residents as possible. So those are some of the good news that I didn't get into. I don't want Helen to think that that I'm all doom and gloom, because Helen is the one who sort of keeps it positive when I'm like down on things, you know, and getting a little sullen. She'll tell me, no, it's not so bad. So this is just some of the infographics, but I'm happy to, you know, well, I'll talk to you guys in person when I see you next, but happy to come on at any other time to talk about some of these specific projects. I mean, the tweet deal, you know, generates a lot of interest, the biotech stuff. So yeah, I used my last 5 minutes for that because I wanted to get that in there, because these are monumental deals, you know, that are incredibly complicated, take hundreds of people on the city involved to get these done. And so, yeah, so we're feeling really good about a lot of these deals, despite the you know, the pain that a lot of people are still feeling.
Well, I'm glad you made sure that we ended on a high note there. So thank you for that, for Carlos, and obviously for what you're doing. I will take a moment here just to, as we always do, just to promote next week's schmooze. I am 99% sure that Shoshana will be back, and she has put together this gathering, which will be with Rachel Forbes, also a child of Becky. Though Carlos, thank you for the humble correction at the beginning about how exactly you were a child of Becky. So yeah, Rachel Forbes is a social worker who will be speaking about anti-Asian racism, and that will be next Wednesday, same time, same place. We hope that you'll join us for that. So that is all. Daryl, any final words?
Nope. I hope to see everybody in person at some point before we leave. I hope we'll see you not only next Wednesday, but maybe this Shabbat. That would be lovely.
This Shabbat would be a great opportunity.
Thanks so much, everybody, for having me. I hope I was somewhat illuminating. I was nervous all day about this. It's like I got off of an ARP community meeting last night, which I was incredibly nervous, and then tonight, this one. Hopefully, tomorrow night I don't have anything as nerve-wracking to do. So, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Carlos.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam. Thanks for all the help getting set up.
Good night, everybody. Thank you, Susie.
Where's Susie?
Really?
Where's Susie?
Right there.
With a blonde, oh, she's she really changes.
Here I am, Susie. I live up in Middlefield, but I'm still a member of the show, and I'm Carlos's mom. So of course I'm in the office.
And Carlos lives on McKinley.
Yep.
Yes, and that's why I'm around all the time. So I can visit my two little girls.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night now.